The creative act isn't necessarily over once you're done making the thing that you set out to make. It can be if we are creating for creating's sake, which I highly encourage you to do. But if you intend to share this thing, or if it is destined to interact with other humans, there is another step to the creative process, which is where to release this thing, what to release. When should you keep something to yourself? When is it perfectionism and your inner voice that is stopping you from sharing something? So there's this process that happens after we finish the creation before it gets to the audience. And that's what I want to talk about today. The question is what to share and what not to share. And I mean that in a couple of ways. I mean that in like with your creations, what does your audience want to see? What is going to be helpful to bring them into your world and help them get a clearer picture of how you think and how you see the world and how you want things to change and what your unique worldview is and your creative spirit and your energy. So it's what to share in that way. And then also what to share in conversation. When you are holding like a deep truth, when do we need to exercise divine restraint and keep that thing to ourselves versus when do we speak and try and use our voice to change the way somebody perceives something in the world? Because there's a lot of people I talk to who struggle with causing harm. They don't want to say something that hurts another person. And of course, nobody does. So the first part of this is as someone who is trying to put my voice out into the world and is trying to serve and is trying to help, what is okay to share on like my social media networks or with people in my physical immediate world versus what should I keep to myself? Specifically, the frame for this question comes in the context of a niche. So if my offer is in helping women who are dating, it is not. Then do I only talk about that thing? And or to bring it to a broader scale, if you are a watercolor artist mainly, but you feel drawn to oil painting, do you only stick to watercolor and keep all the oil to yourself? Because that's what you're known for. That's basically what I'm talking about here. And I am of a kind of new and emerging belief, which is completely different from the niche system, which tells you that you should only share one specific thing. And to be completely honest with you, the algorithm, if that's what you're doing, and this is in an online space, does prefer that because it knows who to get these things out to. I would argue probably like a publishing agent would prefer that. Right? We see this in movies. Like, no, you're known for this. Or like, okay, in the book Green Lights, Matthew McConaughey talks about how he like keeps getting pinned for rom-com movies because that's what he's known for. And it's actually incredibly hard for him to break out of that pattern. The issue with that is it is incredibly painful as a person to only talk about this one tiny aspect of yourself. If you are here to have any degree of depth in what you do and what you talk about and what you bring out to the world, you are a human with infinite capacity and interests that vary widely and so many different parts of your personality and components. And to try and force all of that into this little narrow banned, I don't think is serving our soul. I think we're better off to share what we are, because we are now in the time of the internet. And that means you have access to billions of other people. And with those kinds of numbers, you are bound to have other people that are the same flavor weird that you are, like the same mix of weird stuff that you're into or weird ways that you think. And so by sharing all of yourself, you end up seeing other people. Like, let's say you have 8 attributes. You might have, 0.0001% that have all 8, but then you've got these people that have 7 of those 8 or 6 of those 8 attributes. And there's just enough overlap there that they're really drawn in, that they can really see themselves in you. And that's ultimately what this is all about. We're all just being reflections for one another and trying to help each other see and remember. And so if you share, you give an opportunity to connect with other like-minded people. And ultimately, to bring this back into the world of like business, if you have an offer that's out there and you are promising an outcome, like make more money, for example, that is on the surface level what the work is. However, on a much deeper level, there is an identity shift that needs to happen in order to make more money. And so the real work is the identity shift that is occurring, or the energetics that are shifting below this surface level work. And as the practitioner or the mentor or the guide, you've got to remember both ends of that equation. And by sharing all of yourself, what happens is people don't get fixated on one side or the other. They don't get fixated on just, the money or just the deeper work, the deeper change, the character change that's happening underneath, because you're talking about your character change and the things that you're going through and talking about how you're making more money. And so people start to see this link. Another example is I have a buddy who is a musician. He plays tuba. Shout out John Duffy. He just was on tour with Jean-Baptiste. He helps other tuba players and, teaches them how to get gigs and all of this stuff. However, he knows that what he's really doing is shifting their identity, shifting their personality to become a tuba player, because most of them have this other thing and then they masquerade as the tuba player. And if you really want to be successful in that space, you have to shift into this new way of being. And so this applies to everything across the board. And by talking to all of you, you get to talk to these different parts and pieces. And so even though your offer with the carrot that you're dangling out in front is something you talk about, you're also talking about the deeper transformation that's happening. So I guess what I'm saying here is I encourage you to share almost all of it. The exception is there are certain times where you will know in your heart that you are creating for creating's sake, that you are just staying in a mode of working with the energies that are floating around, like being a conduit, being a channel, because it's ultimately the creative process that shapes who we are. And so by not sharing sometimes, what you are doing is preparing yourself in some way, shape, or form, whether for something to do now or something that's coming later. And the moment that you share that thing, all the energy gets sucked out of it. For example, being at like the most beautiful sunset of all time. And instead of just being present in that sunset, you're filming. And there's times that it's okay to film. I've certainly done it. So you need to discern. I'm not saying never do it, but I'm saying feel in your heart and know, is this a moment that I'm to keep to myself. I would also say another thing that you should keep to yourself is any insight that is not fully settled or landed in you. Meaning that you're like in the mix of it right then, and you're still like pendulum swinging from side to side, because you're going to come across as ungrounded or unanchored, because that thing isn't in your heart yet. And people can feel that and know that. It's like you're speaking from something that isn't embodied, and people can see through that in a heartbeat. Other than that, I say share it all, because we are trying to, again, in the internet, it's a big world, and that means people don't know you super well. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take some consistency, some time under attention, my mentor calls it, of people paying attention to what you're doing so that you can take them from this place of low trust to high trust. That's ultimately what this process is about. It's like sharing your heart with someone and letting them know who you are, and interacting with them through this process, letting them know that you care. And it's like a really cool way to be a whole human and to connect with other whole humans who are like you. So the questions to ask yourself are around, like, are you not sharing because you're afraid of something? That's really what a lot of this boils down to. A lot of it is making excuses that it's because you feel like it's not good enough, because you were told that when you were a kid that you weren't good enough, or nothing that you ever did was accepted. And so that sticks with you. And the main fears are of judgment. So this is especially common in the earlier stages where you're not in this new identity yet, right? We talked about that shifting identity. And if you're not grounded in that yet, when people see you standing for something, it's going to trigger them, because, well, if you stand for something, people are going to have the opposite opinion. So there are people who are going to say something about what you have to say. I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. I'm saying that that doesn't make your wisdom valid or invalid. You are allowed to speak what you feel and what you believe and what you know. And so as long as it's coming from a place of a pure heart, then let people say what they're going to say. And you also would be surprised. A lot of the time, people aren't paying attention. So, we got to remember what our audience is. Like, if you're just getting started in this and there's going to be 10 people that see this video, remember that. Don't over-engineer it. Then another fear that people have is, am I going to cause harm by sharing this? And there I would just say, don't be mindful not to take away other people's power. Let other people discern. Let other people decide if what you have to say is right for them or not right for them. There are certain circumstances where I guess we could say something that is harmful. Like if we're spewing hate out into the world, of course, I would say use a filter of love thy neighbor, love God. Outside of that, I think as long as you're honest and truthful, then that's what matters. And then lastly, the third fear is it's not good enough. We already talked about that. In the beginning, it's always bad. It's always bad when you're learning something new. So you just have to let that be the case. And remember, you're not going to have a ton of people watching anyway. Excuse me. Okay, moving on to the second part of this is, in conversation, do I keep something to myself or do I talk to others? I gotta get some water. I'll be right back. Okay. So do I keep it to myself or do I say it out loud? My default position on this is actually the opposite from what I was just saying. My default is keep it to yourself. exercise divine restraint. Silence is underestimated and talking is overrated. Your aura does most of the work. Like just being your grounded, embodied, present self is one of the most powerful things that can possibly exist. So most of the time, you don't have to say anything. You can let the silence do the talking. If you are going to talk, the goal is to spread a a beautiful, loving energy, awakening, peace, ecstasy. Like when we're talking, those are the things that we're trying to get across. Not to what most people do, is like manipulate in subtle ways or get something that we want or make sure that we don't lose something, avoid something that we don't want. So in order to also have just additional information here as to whether or not you should speak something, we need I recommend developing a really strong connection to your body, because it's our bodily sensations that can tell us whether or not we're in right timing, whether or not we're going to have the right tone, like whether we're being diplomatic or putting our foot in our mouth. If you have an open feeling, then this is for me. I have this sense of like expansion, freedom. When I feel that, I know my energy, my aura is already doing the talking. Like there's already communication that's happening there. So to me, that is a green light for me to use my voice and for me to say what I have to say. When I feel constricted or withdrawn or locked down, then that's my cue to keep it to myself and I don't have to say anything in that moment. And then the last part of this is mentally considering, where is the other person? Like, what is the information that you know? And are they in a position that it makes sense to say the thing that you have to say? The other part of it is, do you have permission? Is the other person engaged? And even if they are, have you asked them if they want your whatever it is that you have to say? And if you have that permission and you are looking at the other person, you can read their body language as you're talking and just paying attention to their energy and to their face and remembering that what is most important is graciousness, not to get what you have to say off your chest. So we think through, we feel into what's happening so that we can be diplomatic and so that we can say the right thing in the right timing, which can really shift the course of someone's life. So I'm not saying never say anything. Quite the opposite. I'm saying that you need to know the power of your words and you need to know restraint so that when you do speak, your words are deeply impactful. And just remember that sometimes silence is the most powerful. So I'm going to shut my mouth.